Our speaker today is Kai Flannery. She's been here a bunch of times before, and after each visit, I hope she will be here again. Kai is a Unitarian Universalist minister who lives in Austin, Texas, and has a bio so long, I would spend the next 5 minutes reading it all. She is on Zoom this time, so all your other Zoomers out there are in good company. She will be expressing her thoughts about current concerns and speaking about human connections and how we can together make our world a better place.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be here this morning with you. I am coming from the far off land of Knoxville, Tennessee. And this morning, as I was visiting with family, and I visited with Dolly Parton via Dollywood. So that was a truly beautiful experience, which will be a little bit reflected in this morning's message. But first, I wanted to take some time with you just to center ourselves and ground ourselves in this present moment. And to start with some words from Marissa Nathan Gerson. She's the author of this book, which is Forget Prayers, Bring Cake, A Single Woman's Guide to Grieving. Speaks to me, yes. So Marissa writes, I wanted the sort of prayer that binds you to the phenomenality of banana trees and blooming figs. I longed for prayers to join me with the massive ginger flowers and birds of paradise in my New Orleans yard. The flowers my father had admired with me. This type of prayer was a constant practice. My choice was to listen to silence, to put my bare feet in the dirt, and to remember that something far beyond this moment of grief is everlasting. Prayer made my solitude sweet. Not only bearable, but at times delectable. I think she's talking about prayer as a kind of being. So let us enter into just being together this morning in our joy, perhaps our exhaustion, and in our yearning. Let us take breaths together. All the way down to our feet, rooting us in this earth, connecting us to plants, to animals, to those who have come before. To those who will come after. In the silence of this place, may we hold this moment with grace. This is my prayer. This is my prayer. Oh. Thank you, friends. Oh, I know you all are thinking this month about the direct experience of transcendent mystery and wonder. And I was working with Jan and Joan and Meredith and others on email, and as I'm working to think about mystery and awe, this Roe versus Wade decision comes down, and I'm feeling anything but awe. And I think I just started breathing back into this song I was thinking of, Love Will Guide Us. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands. You can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. And I've kind of resisted that song for some time, just because I don't think of it as, I think it's saying like, well, some of us just have to be quiet in the background, and some of us get to speak before thousands. And I always think, is that really true? And I think I'm thinking a lot more about it now as we want to move together in a connected way. And as we have to do some of this fighting the way that an ecosystem fights, right? So I read on a cool UU website about this song. It's called Far Fringe. If you ever want to hear a little bit of history about some of our UU hymns, you can look at this website. It's written by a minister. And she points out that this tune of this song, Love Will Guide Us, is named for Olympia Brown, one of our first women ministers. And I will just say, adding some current words to this past event, she was warned, an explanation was given, and nevertheless, Olympia Brown persisted. And that feels like part of my connection to awe in the face of difficulty, is awe in the presence of persistence, right? That and perhaps part of the reason I feel awe in that presence is that I live with ADHD, and I can do different kinds of magic, like staying up all night, but the kind where you show up exactly at the same time each day, every time, and chip away tiny chips at a problem, enormous, regardless of your mental health or your energy level or your competing schedules. That's much harder for me personally. For some of you, that is natural, that is ingrained in you. And all I can do is sort of shake my head in wonder. Because that is the kind of showing up that is needed for some of the work that's coming up for us, right? So I'll just say that some sculptors work in metal, where you imagine it, and you get out your hot fire, you heat it up, you bend or you pound, and then you shine it up and you're amazed and you're joyful. Right? But some sculptures are out of marble, chip, chip, chip. Like the fight for a more sensible economy, where folks are not pressured to take jobs that don't pay, and then are shamed maybe by their national representatives. But so there's these folks I follow on Instagram called Somatic Ecologies, and they write down that one of the things that they wrote this week was, capitalism is ideologically threatened by experiences of awe, not only because awe asks us to reanimate the other. So not to buy something, but just to experience what's around us. But also because awe can't exist in the presence of urgency and scarcity. So I just started thinking about that as awe. What is wonder in this current climate, in this current moment? It could be a march of people protesting, fighting for their rights to be recognized, right? I find courage and awe in people who are suffering actively. And then there's just ordinary courage. There's this woman janitor at ACC where I'm taking classes. And she's like, yeah, I just move the furniture in my house every other week. She's like, I love to. My husband used to complain and my kids used to complain and they were angry at me. But you know what? I really need to. I get bored. It's my house. And I just thought that's a lot of courage. Just to be like, okay, I'm going to be me and I'm still going to be loved. I'm going to move all the furniture around in my house every other week. Good for you. And there's also awe, as in awe, like dog rescue videos, right? These stories of compassion where dogs go from stress to rest, from panic and harm and trauma to cuddling and running with joy. I highly recommend these videos. And I really needed to feel that story in my body, especially during COVID, but now as well. Sometimes I would watch so many in a row that I would get a little angry at myself because they're so dramatic. And you always know the ending, right? And that's a little embarrassing to me. Just like, Kai, this is not classic cinema. You already know what's going to happen. But my body and nervous system were just looking for a real story of suffering that turns out okay. So I think there are a lot of stories that we live out that are that chip, 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 right? Living in a house together, parenting, recovering from a surgery, struggling with mobility or disability, gardening. These are places where we have gradual progress. And I think these are places that demand immense respect. Apparently, reproductive rights is one of these fights as well. Chip, chip, chip. And I know that from reading the history of that battle. And I know that from current events. And here I am in Knoxville, Tennessee. Pigeon Forge is the home of Dolly Parton's Dollywood. This is a woman who started out in a one-bedroom house with 9 brothers and sisters, whose mother had to make her a winter coat out of scraps of many other coats, and classmates teased her. And later she wrote a song about it, Coat of Many Colors, which went to number 4 in the United States in 1971. And so I just want to ask you this morning, what is your voice? What is your voice like? What voice do you offer? Or how do you change the world with your love this morning? And one of the things that's inspiring that for me is this book by Jimmy Allen, platinum selling Black country artist, called My Voice is a Trumpet. It's a great song. It's a great book. Super sweet. And one of the lines in it is, my voice is a rainbow after the storm, loving, comforting, safe, and warm. Or maybe your voice is more like Ann Richards, maybe, who said, I did not want my tombstone to read, she kept a really clean house. I think I'd like him to remember me by saying she opened government to everyone. Another set of voices I'm really respecting and in awe of at this moment, the Frontera Fund, started by a group of women at the border in the Rio Grande Valley in 2016. And they say, we envision a culture in South Texas where anyone who has an abortion does so safely, without shame, and that reproductive justice is employed throughout our communities. I'm in awe of these women. We can still donate to their work, support their work, though they're pausing right now to figure out the new legal landscape in Texas. There are broader groups, abortionfunds.org, the Lilith Fund, Whole Woman's Health Clinic in McAllen. If we go to a website, I was talking about this weekend, and somebody on email said, could you actually talk about some of the resources that are out there if we're wanting to donate and share funds? So I'll just say needabortion.org. And these vetted and grounded spaces are safer than trying to create or listen to people online or go to other spaces. So I just want to share that. But we have all these really good arguments, opening government to everyone, envisioning a culture in South Texas where anyone who has an abortion does so safely without shame, hearing all of the voices of our folks who need these protections. And the only argument I can really see on the other side is shame. And some folks are fighting that directly too, in a really cool way. This organization you can Google called We Testify, where folks are just sharing their abortion stories online, just in open ways, trying to get that out there so that people see, so that those stories can become more wide open. And Ann Richards too, I don't know what her house was like, but she said, well, my number one cause has always been women's reproductive health, and that needs to be protected. She was warned, she was given an explanation, and nevertheless, she persisted. Chip, chip, chip. So I asked this morning, what is your voice? What is your voice like? Is it the constant flow of a water tap or a waterfall, which wears away at stone? Is your voice a low rumble which expands to thunder? Like a tree, is your voice a shade to allow other other plants to flourish, other things that don't have roots as deep as yours, allowing cultivation? Is your voice spiky like an agave, poking people to pay attention? And you spread, these plants spread, and they're very hardy. Are these red-orange flowers or Jack in the Pulpit, where you have a lot of green leaves, but also as a core value, you want to bring these little colors of joy? Does your voice shed a hot, bright light like the sun, helping some things to grow, but maybe overheating and stamping some things out? Is your voice a spotlight where you can focus on one thing really clearly? Or maybe your voice is a warm light where you create communal spaces with good smells and nice drinks and the knowledge that people will be heard and loved. Maybe your voice is a deep, dark midnight, calm and restful, slow, allowing for shy creatures to come out and explore. Or maybe your voice is a spicy green sauce that keeps things interesting, trying not to overwhelm the rest of the dish. Or maybe you are meat and potatoes, simple and blunt. A shepherd's pie or a rich soup. Maybe your voice has been frozen, like a soup in the summer, and you need the right company to thaw out. Or maybe your voice is an asparagus, quirky and unique, and you're looking for your lemon in your grill for other people on the journey, the right place to shine. These are many ways that our voices can be. And are we going to hide them under a bushel? Say it with me. Hide it under a bushel? No. I'm going to let it shine. Right? There are these blue coveralls that I wear in which I feel invincible. You can picture me in like a mechanic's outfit. In that outfit, I feel ready for anything. Grease or who knows what. These coveralls don't apologize and they don't care too much for appearances. Dolly Parton said, figure out who you are and do it on purpose, knowing what we want to be and living into that being. And that's not easy, right? It's not always easy. When I think about deep and lilting and complex, I think about Sarah Vaughan and her voice. Anybody like Sarah Vaughan? Anybody appreciate that style of jazz? I was just reading a biography of her called Queen of Bebop, written by a Seattle jazz writer, Elaine Hayes. Sarah Vaughan's story began with gospel and classical music. Her family was determined to teach their kids these markers of higher culture. She turned to pop music on the radio and started listening in for the jazz moments that she could catch, running home from school to catch like 15 minutes of jazz on the radio. And she started shaping her voice from those influences. And there's a moment where she's suddenly given this opportunity to sing at the Cafe Club for a certain number of months in New York City, which is a huge opportunity, right? But at that moment in the Village, she was not the hip new thing. She wasn't Billie Holiday. She didn't sound like Bessie Smith. She just kept doing music with her voice, like she was the instrument. All this up and down the scale, all of this scatting. And she was inspired by these instruments. She was inspired by Ella Fitzgerald. And as her biographer says, she was drowned out night after night at this club. People would just ignore her singing because they were like, oh, we don't really know what this is about, and talk. And she kept on singing. Sarah Vaughan was persistent, and she knew what she was exploring, what music was freeing and interesting to her. And one night, I'll tell you, this is a cool story. Paul Robeson, and you know Paul Robeson, whose voice I can't even imitate. So deep, so beautiful. And he comes into the club and he sees everybody, just all these jazz hipsters sitting around talking over Sarah Vaughan. And he says, quiet down, folks. I want to hear what this young lady has to say. Right? quiets the room, at least for that night. But it wasn't just the hipster audiences that Sarah needed to be strong against. One night, she was singing in an integrated club. One night, she and one of the coat check girls and her trumpeter and some other folks got attacked in the street in New York for singing in an integrated club. They got physical wounds on them. Somebody ended up in the hospital. This was just for going out there and singing, which was already hard. And some critics were looking for a blues voice from her. We're trying to push her to be more like Bessie Smith, be more like Ella, be more like Billie Holiday. Some people really thought that, if they could push her into this little box, they could, market her in a particular way. She just kept singing the songs as she was interested in them and as she could help to create them. Can you imagine standing on a stage night after night? You live in New Braunfels, you live in Texas. We're religious liberals in Texas, so I'm guessing that you actually do know what it's like to stand on a stage night after night while people talk over you. And it calls for deep persistence and deep roots. Dolly Parton wrote, "I'll never harden my heart, but I have toughened the muscles around it." Like, yes, girl, that is right. Some of the news lately has felt like, I don't know. When I lived in Boston, it felt rough to listen to the news sometimes. But so lately it's just felt, living in Texas, these are body blows. These are just hurting my heart. And sometimes with that kind of news, we may be frozen in place. We may be unsure how we can help or be helped. Unsure that we even can. Trauma can do that to us. But we can also use our voices to ask for what we need, to turn the story on its head. When she was dealing with the grief of divorce, Autumn Brown, a sister of Adrienne Marie Brown, you may know, she's a cool author, and she writes about organizing and climate and all kinds of things. She and her sister have a podcast together called How to Survive the End of the World that is giving me life. It is really good. So Autumn was getting a divorce, and she actually decided she would start a registry for the things that she had lost in the split. Feeling she needed that concrete support of her community around her. So many people responded, people she didn't even know. They bought her kitchen knives and end tables and lamps. And there she was with kids and suddenly being showered with love. If we're stuck in that place of grief, sometimes we need ritual around grief. And it doesn't have to be a one-dimensional sad endeavor. It doesn't have to be all tears, right? So Marissa, who wrote this book, Forget Prayers and Bring Cake, she talks about how sometimes the practices are ridiculous and sometimes they're dignified, and that they often have to do with just sinking in to what's around us, being in closer connection with what's around us in a realistic way, and not forgetting awe. Maybe part of your ritual is that you need to use your voice. I couldn't actually cry about the Roe decision until I went and I marched and I shouted with other sad and angry folks. So maybe part of your process is you need to sit on the state house floor with the folks from Abortion for Texas. You can follow them on Instagram, TX4Abortion, letter 4. But Sarah Vaughan said singing gave her courage. She said, when I sing, trouble can sit right on my shoulder and I don't even notice. That is how I feel too about singing. And just to bring us back to our hymn, if you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, we can give from deep within us. We can live from deep within us. We can look to these flowers and trees in our prayers. We can gain strength from them, lift up and be lifted up. We can change the world with our love, right? So Dolly Parton got a lot of flack when she started acting. This is a big lesson for us, I feel. It's a little bit funny, right? Some of the movies that she came out with were not exactly high culture, let's say it that way. But so if somebody looks at us and they think they know who we are, and sometimes that opinion is said very loudly and it weighs a lot. And that opinion could be a place where we lose hope, where we abdicate the responsibility of our own self-definition, right? That we say what we stand for and what's important to us. As Dolly said, I'm not going to limit myself just because people can't accept the fact that I can do something else. And sometimes it's not just we ourselves who are under pressure, but sometimes it's others that are under pressure who we're wanting to support. Right? So we use our voices to support them the best way we know how, like Paul Robeson at the Cafe Club. And in this heat, I'm thinking so much about trees which make our life in Texas livable. I heard the other day that a live oak can weigh 20,000 pounds. That's powerful. That is a powerful being. A tree that shades is not insubstantial or weak, right? Especially when others are on a hard journey, you are essential. So maybe you are not thinking about reproductive rights for yourself. Maybe you're a cis guy creating a shady space for someone else who's affected by anti-choice legislation. You're creating a space for someone to rest and thrive and speak their truth. Your presence too, you matter in this fight. Maybe you're a parent raising a kid and just holding up your branches against the elements. And we celebrate that. We celebrate your shade that you're bringing, your enduring presence. As Dolly said, storms make trees take deeper roots. Maybe your voice is in acts of care, in which case, make sure that there are also small acts of care being done for you, maybe by someone else or by your own lovely self. So we can speak clearly for someone who needs it, but we have to first learn clearly to speak for ourselves. If we speak clearly for ourselves, maybe we need to learn to see others clearly and support their needs. There's this poem I really like by the poet U.A. Fanthorpe, and it's called Atlas. It's not necessarily the kind of poem that comes up at weddings all the time because it's a little bit, it's sort of more, it's a little bit prosaic. It doesn't have all the bells and flowers that you might think of at a wedding. But here are some words from that poem. There is a kind of love called maintenance, which stores the WD-40 and knows when to use it. And maintenance is the sensible side of love, which knows what time and weather are doing to my brickwork, which insulates my faulty wiring, laughs at my dry, rotten jokes, remembers my need for gloss and grouting, which keeps my suspect edifice upright in the air, as Atlas did the sky. Maybe that's the love that you offer, the care and support. Whatever kind of voice, whatever kind of love you bring, just be on the lookout for what is a mirror for you. I think the key is to know who we are and also being ready to be amazed, being ready to be in awe at ourselves and the people that we might think we know. Maybe your mirror is Sarah Vaughan or Chopin, structured, but with hints of jazz harmonics and humor, deep and lilting and complex. Sarah Vaughan wrote, "I am not a special person. I think she actually said this in an interview. She said, I'm not a special person. She said, I'm a regular person who does special things. So all of us this morning, in these battles we did not create and we did not invite, but we're somehow called into, I invite us to bring our voice, to bring our love in whatever form that takes, to do special things. So may it be for each of us. Amen.